Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Last time we had an interesting look at understanding what are the more subtle parts of my personality. Because from an equipment standpoint, we can point to the body, which is less subtle than the mind, which is less subtle than this intellect. That's for sure. Pervasiveness is there, everything. But when we looked at it from a layer of where does intelligence fall in this sphere? Where does contemplation fall in the spectrum? Where does food fall? And that was a very big surprise for us at the end right there. So we saw these varying layers of subtlety. What we have to understand next is, using this understanding of subtle elements in my personality, how do I eventually point to the fact that my true identity is nothing but that existence principle? Logically, I can get there. However, without examples that actually anchor me to this thinking, this idea does not set in. Because there can be several objections that I can raise when it comes to understanding, am I this existent principle? So in the 6th chapter of Chandogya Upanishads, one of the 10 major Upanishads, it goes in depth, giving the most memorable examples for our vichara that really show that despite having objections to the fact that I am this existence principle, how is it really reaffirmed for me? So how does this start? Like all of our shastras, it's a narrative, where there's Uddalaka Rishi and his son Shvetaketu. Shvetaketu goes to study at the Gurukula from a young age. Even though Uddalaka Rishi is a great rishi in his own right, he understands no matter how great of a teacher you are, your own kids will never take your teaching seriously. Isn't that the case? That's why unasked advice, never teach your own kids how to drive, send them to a driving school. Those of you that have been through that, you know, right? Because the only thing they'll gain is disrespect for how you drive if you teach them how to drive. When I turned 15, my dad said, you sit in the front seat from now on, no more phone in the back or book in the back, sit in the front and watch how I drive. I said, okay. So then the yellow light comes. That means slow down, right? But this is Texas, so yellow light, he speeds up and we go through. And I said, I thought yellow light meant slow down. He said, don't do what I say. No, don't do what I do what I say. Bhagavan Krishna style. I said, okay. Then stop sign came. Stop sign means complete stop, is what I had studied. Instead, he slows down just enough to make sure a cop's not there and then speeds back up again. I said, that wasn't a complete stop. Again, like Bhagavan Krishna, he said, do what I say, not what I do. So then he figured out pretty much, okay, look, driving school is the way to go. This whole dad teaching the son how to drive is not going to work. So Uddalaka Rishi had that jnana that let him learn from the Gurukula. He'll take it more seriously. So after the 10 to 12 years of cursory learning, he comes back. And what he's done at this Gurukula is called Adhyayanam, Shastra Adhyayanam, which is the chanting and memorization of a specific shaka, branch of the Veda, or an entire Veda, to pass that on, as is our oral tradition. The deeper meanings of what he's chanting may not be apparent to him. But he comes back with this arrogance that I know everything. So to knock him down a peg, Uddalaka Rishi asks him a very basic question. Seemingly basic question. He says, what is that source that all beings arise from and eventually go back to? What is that source that all beings arise from and eventually go back to? So you see the depth of this very question right here? We're at a tangible physical level. You say, I come from my mother's womb. You don't go back there, though. So what fits this criteria? What is this riddle about? Shvetaketu cannot answer the question. So then he humbly takes his father as his guru at this point, and he says, teach me what this is then. Now, we've seen the existence principle is that which I come from and I go back to. There are a plethora of various objections that can arise from this. One that starts off is, how is it that I go back to this source, that means everyone has to go back to this source. There's only one existence principle, yet you and I lead such different lives, assuming so many different labels, going in so many directions. How is it that everyone goes back to that same source, though? Because no matter where we go to our same homes, individual homes. We come back to our own patterns. Even when we intellectually go in different directions, we come back to our own ways of thinking, our own tendencies, even in that way. How can you say there's one homogeneous entity that we all come back to then? Isn't there that distinction between everyone? Now the example he gives is a beautiful one. Uddalaka Rishi says, it's like pollination that forms honey. How is pollination facilitated? Which animal? Honeybees, right? They go from flower to flower, and that cross-pollination that occurs, whether knowingly or unknowingly, produces that honey, and then it's all brought together. When honey is brought together in one mass, can you point at it and say, this part of the honey is from this flower right here, this part of the honey is from this flower? You can't do that. It's one homogeneous mass at the end of the day. It's not like different parts of the honey taste different because they come from different flowers. It comes in as one entity. Similarly, despite these distinctions that we've placed on ourselves as coming from these different sources, at the end of the day, there is no distinction when it comes to existence. It is that one substratum underlying any other kind of change or distinction. That has to be the fact. So that takes care of one objection right off the bat. What's the next objection that comes up? That in our lives, there is no point where we assume one singular label. What's being asked of us here is assume this one singular label that I am existence. Not even I am existing, I am existent. See the subtlety right there? Existence means I am that principle. When do we have such a static identity? Identities are always changing. I become a mother, that doesn't mean I stop being a daughter myself. I still am a sibling. I still am a spouse. I still am an employee. I'm still a learner. I'm still a boss. These are interchangeable roles based on what is required at that moment. I invoke that identity. So how can you in the world say that there is ever a time where there's a singular identity? That never happens. Furthermore, the situation also arises that in my daily transactional state, I notice that anytime there is a cause, something of that cause must be in the effect. I see clay as a cause and a clay pot as an effect. The clayness, if you will, pervades that pot. Even when parents give birth to a child, the DNA makeup of that child comes from those parents. Traces of that cause are definitely there in the effect. However, here we're saying that entity, which is that existence, is just one, without any distinctions. Yet again, we see so many distinctions in the world with roles and identities and labels. So an example has to be given to prove that as well. And the example is another beautiful one. Uddalaka Rishi says, there are innumerable number of rivers and bodies of water in the world. Every river eventually has an inlet into an ocean, and we say there are 7 oceans, but essentially it's one body of water. They're all connected to each other. Because of the boundaries that we create and the changes to those labels that we make, like Gulf of Mexico being something different now, we give those certain names. Essentially, however, it's one mass of water at the end of the day. Similarly, you and I take on these various labels based on functionality, based on location, based on stage in life, all of these things. At the end of the day, all of these various identities wash away. They merge into that one identity of existence. Meaning, change is not an impediment to understanding that I am that existence principle. They're functioning in 2 different planes that way. Where from one perspective, like the example, I can see that there are individual rivers and this is the ocean and the political boundary and all of this. Water is water at the end of the day. 66% of our globe is covered in it. It is all one homogeneous mass of water. Next objection that can come up then. This idea, very clearly, that how can you say, given the definition of Brahman, it is attributeless, it is changeless, it is without any action, yet you're saying it produces this entire world of so much diversity, of varied creation? How can that be? Point to me a single instance where something has been produced from seemingly nothing. Because again, the argument we had before was, in an effect, there should be some attribute of the cause in that effect. Even when you put curd in boiling milk and then let it curdle and it becomes one mass, even then that lactose element and everything is still pervasive. The appearance may be different, the form may be different, but its DNA, if you will, is still integrally the same. That has to be there. Here we're saying it's night and day completely. There is this entity without any kind of attributes, yet we're saying gives rise to something with so many. How is that even possible? Here the famous line Uddalaka Rishi says to him is, Shraddhatsva Somya, have faith. Faith in what? Faith that something can come from seemingly nothing. And what's the amazing example that he gives? This is my favorite example. He says, bring me the seed of a banyan tree. Because a banyan tree is huge. Sometimes I've seen them so big. I think in Chidambaram there's one banyan tree that you don't know which the trunk is, because so many different branches are there that go into the ground. It's hard to tell what the original trunk is. That's how big the tree is. Despite the tree being that big, logic tells us even that massive tree came from a seed this big. So this is bring me the seed of a tree. He brings it. Break the seed apart. Breaks it open. What do you see inside that seed? Nothing. Now, this tree is so big here, seeing nothing in that seed, but you could say, okay, at least there's potential energy in that seed, but you break it open, there is nothing perceptible in there. And a botanist will tell you that, oh, there is a shoot that comes out at some point, it germinates, then it grows in the soil, this and that. That is all the what. How does that happen, though? Even from a chemistry standpoint, the molecule of water, 2 hydrogen atoms, 1 oxygen atom together creates that water. That is the what of it still. How? How does that happen? Ultimately, there is no explanation that shows how that happens. Meaning the faith has to be there. That trust in what Shastra is saying, that if it says Brahman without these attributes and everything still does produce this world, just as a seed, seemingly empty seed does produce that huge tree, have that same faith. So what an apt example that's used to prove that point. Now the other objection that still arises here, still in the mind of the student, can be that perception is how I know about the world, everything that I know. Seeing is believing. Unless I have not perceived it with my 5 senses, I do not take it as true. Here you are telling me that this is not the right avenue to know this knowledge. You must rely on that Shastra Pramana, words of the scripture. That's an impediment to me. As a logical 21st century man, that is an impediment to how I think and how I accept things. So what's the example given here? The father puts some salt in some water and mixes it up. And then calls his son over, places that glass of water in front of him, and says, is there salt in this water? When salt is dissolved in the water, by looking at it, can you tell whether there's salt in there or not? What's the only way to know? Taste. So he says, taste it at the top, taste it at the middle, taste it at the bottom. Now the only way I think that can happen is if there's a straw. Now there's a question I thought of recently. I know it's a weird question. Did they have straws in Vedic times, do you think? If they did, it had to be mentioned in some scripture. I'm still looking for that reference where they talk about a straw. So I hope I don't spend my whole life looking for that, but maybe Mahabharata. If it's anywhere, it's got to be Mahabharata, right? So I'm looking for an instance where Bhima must have drank a coconut water with a straw or something like that. I'm looking for it. But that's the only way I can imagine he got the taste, at the top, middle, and the bottom. So the way the dialogue goes between them, tasting at the top. Katamiti, what is this? Lavarnamiti, this is salt, at the middle layer. Katamiti, Lavarnamiti, bottom layer. Katamiti, Lavarnamiti, proves what? Two things. One, when that valid means of knowledge of sight does not give me this knowledge, another one must be gone to, and that's taste. That's one point that's made. Second point that's made is this existence principle is not localized anywhere. You cannot say that my brain is here, heart is here. Existence is in this 6-foot body right here, or in that 5-foot body right there. It does not work that way. There are schools of thought within the Hindu umbrella that say the consciousness of a person is as large as they are. So an ant has a little bit of consciousness, an elephant has a massive consciousness. There are schools of thought that say that. The Vaisheshika atomic theory, they call it. That's not true, however. Things like existence, consciousness, these attributes that we put to that truth, it is all pervasive, meaning, again, this transactional plane and its variations have no effect on it. But the broader point we get from this specific example is when one source of knowledge, valid means of knowledge like perception, does not take me to the truth, I must rely on a stronger means of knowledge, that is the Shastra. Now, to tie up all of this together, there is one hard-hitting example that comes up. It's the story of the man from Gandhara. Gandhara was a kingdom in Bharatavarsha, which is present-day what city? Kandahar, Afghanistan. That's where Gandhari and Shakuni come from. And Bharatavarsha in those days stretched all the way past Iran, the Persian region, past Iraq as well. That Fertile Crescent and everything, there's evidence that shows Bharatavarsha stretched far and wide there. So this man is from Gandhara and is walking with some goods, maybe some gold or something. Maybe he's a salesman or a merchant. He's going through a forest-like area. There's a road going through it. All of a sudden, robbers come out of nowhere, and they tie up his hands and his legs and take him into the forest, blindfolding him along the way so that he can't even see where he's going. It's like partying with Naxals, right? They take him to the forest like that. They take him in there, drive him around somewhere, and they tie him to a tree. So his hands and legs are tied, can't move, and his eyes are tied up as well. And they leave. They steal all his goods, and they leave him for dead, so he can't even go find them. Now, this man is crying day and night. Help! Find me! Save me! Cut me loose! Help me! Help me! There's no one in that forest to even hear him. So it's the age-old question, right? What is it? If a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear, it doesn't make a sound. Like that, he must be thinking, he's shouting and no one is there to hear him. Day turns into night. Before he knows it, feelings of hunger, thirst, all of this is starting to hit him. And he's lamenting, man, I'm alone here in this forest. I'll never see my family again. I'm going to die here. And again, he tries crying again. Help me, save me. This time, the good news is he does hear a response. The bad news is, what's the response? Something like that, some kind of tiger line or something. He says, okay, better to keep quiet then. I don't want to attract that kind of attention. So that misery is also there. I mean, he has to use the bathroom. He has to go right there, tied to that tree. Can't even use the restroom in peace. Now, 2 or 3 days, he goes through this. And when he feels he's on the verge of death, or even feels death may be welcome at this point, given the situation, he sees that his blindfold is taken off by someone. A compassionate old man has come, taken his blindfold off. And he's untying him. And this man is frantically saying, I've been here for so long, they stole all my things, I haven't eaten, I haven't drank anything, I think I'm going to die. He's going on and on. And the old man asks him, where are you from? He probably can't even hear the question because he's so frantic, and he keeps going, I've been trapped here, they took all my goods, everything. He says, calm down. Where are you from? And he says, I'm from the Gandhara kingdom. This is okay. Takes him by the hand, takes him to the middle of the road, and pointing eastward, he says, Gandhara, your kingdom is that way. You can't see it from here, but go along that way. And if you have a doubt as you're going, knock on anyone's door and they'll guide you in the right direction. Now, what does this whole analogy mean? You and I are that jiva carrying our goods going down that path, wherever we're headed. Robbers are those desires that we harbor. Those desires that you and I have, they bind us to this forest. What is the forest? Forest of this human body. And blindfolded with moha, delusion, so we can't even see the limitations that are there. Those wild animals, like those lions and tigers that are ready to pounce and eat that person, these are the sense objects all around us, waiting to entrap us, ensnare us, chew us up, and spit us out. And all the crying that he did of, oh, I won't see my kids again, oh, I'm trapped here, help me, help me. That cry of help is what we do, saying, I want a car, I want a house, I want a good family, I want my kids to be like this, I want this kind of job, I want people to treat me this way, I want this satisfaction, I want to be happy in this way. That is all the crying that we do. Stuck to that tree that way. Now finally that blindfold is removed. We're untied by someone compassionate. That comes in the form of the Guru. Now, the Guru pointed out Gandhara, that it's in that direction. That is the source that the person came from, and it's where they have to go back to. That is that existence principle, realizing that I am that Sat. Now, notable here, did the Guru hold his hand and walk him all the way back to his village? Simply pointed. That's the Guru's role. Cannot gain that moksha for me. He can simply point and say, this is your priority, this is your direction. It's up to me to take that charge and go there. So I love this example. See how multifaceted and how deep it is, showing every single part of this jiva's journey. One more attribute is still left in this whole section. One more doubt that can arise. There has to be some incentive to want to seek this realization. Or else, what's the difference between me and a realized person? I go bald, realized person also goes bald. I have health issues, the realized person also had only 18% of his heart working at the end of his life. I face pressures from people having to travel or work with others I don't like, or having to bend to what their needs are. He spent 40 years teaching having to do that, having to deal with the people he came across. Tell me again, what is the benefit of being realized? There has to be something special about it. They also go through physical problems. They also have to face emotions. They also have to face clarity or lack of clarity. What's the point of being realized then? Some benefit should be there. Don't we think this way sometimes? Like, sell me on realization then. Why this entire effort to be realized, detaching from things, not enjoying the world, seeing everything, the pain in all the objects? For what? Now, the example given here really sheds light on this. In that Vedic time period, if someone was accused of theft or some heinous crime, they were brought in the court of law, and an oil would be applied to their hand. And then they were told to grasp taptam parashum. Taptam parashum is a heated axe. If they were telling the truth about their innocence, even when they hold that red-hot fiery axe, it does not burn them. The truth protects them. If they're telling the lie, then it burns the heck out of their hand right there. Now, a jnani and an ajnani, we all hold that same axe. That axe that's heated is the world around us. If I subscribe to truth, that this world is unreal, problems of this world do not affect me because I am that existence principle, this axe or this world will not burn me. But if I am attached to this world, that axe will burn the hell out of my hand. Because any attachment that I have will disappoint me will hurt me. Attachment to a person, either they leave this world at some point or I leave this world at that point. The anxiety of that is an attachment that causes pain. Attachment to wealth and money and material objects, those run out at a certain point. Or my entire life's anxiety is to preserve what I have accumulated. Heck, attachment to my favorite sports team even. They trade my favorite player, I'm sorrowful after that. That happens. So any attachment causes that pain, that is being burnt. The fruit of this realization is knowing the unreality of this world, I stay asanga, unaffected by it. If that's not the greatest enticing incentive for realization, what else is, right? That is the unmitigated bliss that is talked about. So just by these few examples, the beauty that we find here is at every single stage of our analysis, whenever these objections arise, how can I honestly be this existence principle if there are so many changes to me? There is nothing tethering me and holding me down. There are all these labels that I assume. There is so much diversity, which everything has to go to one source. We raised valid objections throughout. Yet, see how the examples really helped our thinking process? This is the beauty of the Vedantic way of thinking. Because Shastra shows that upapatti, meaning logical demonstration of every idea, where without an example, what else do we have to hold on to? So the next time the objection does come up in my thinking, that how can we say that there is one source of everything if there's so much diversity? Just like the honeybee and the honey that it produces from all different places, yet no distinction in that honey. When there comes this objection of, how can I say I'm that existent principle, which I never rest on when there are so many different labels I assume, that body of water example, showing that it's one homogeneous mass, these labels are just functionalities that I give myself. When I have this doubt that how can something as specific as this world come from seemingly that entity that has no action, no attributes, the example of the seed becoming the banyan tree, seemingly nothing becoming something. When I have this earnest doubt that what is the point of this realization, the example of the heated axe. Seeing very clearly, truth alone is what keeps me unattached, and attachment to that truth is what keeps me from getting literally burned by the world around me. So amazing to see. So with that, we have a surprise today. They're making Shivalingas, 3rd and 4th graders, for Shivaratri. So I want to go check that out with all of you pretty soon. Let's do a quick Q&A session first. Are there any lingering questions from anything we've done, either today or the past few weeks? If you don't have questions, I have questions for you. Let that be the incentive to ask questions. Yes?
The things that you talk about here, it makes sense in this room.
Mm-hmm.
When we go out in the real world, maybe a day it lasts.
I'm glad it at least makes sense in this room. But yes, when you go out to the real world, yeah.
So, is there a practice or something that we can do to help it apply more effectively in our education?
The best type of mananam then is taking bite-sized pieces of this learning, dwelling on it then. For instance, we gave these various examples today. Over the next, say, 5 days, take one example each day in the morning. On your drive to work, you can start thinking about it. It'll come up in your free time, this kind of thinking, where it remains abstract if it's only thought of within these 4 walls. Outside of it, it seems like it does not apply to my real life, so to speak, or that it doesn't seem to come at the right time, this type of knowledge. But that's what these examples are meant for. That when you can dwell on these ideas that, am I the existence principle? What are doubts I have in my own mind that keep me from that? That should be the first layer. Any of these principles that arise, what can I come up with as an objection? How is that answered by what I'm studying? That's one great way. Another way to keep this knowledge in mind is Bhagavad Gita has 700 shlokas in it. Okay? If you study 2 shlokas a day, and say 365 days of the year, how many days are there that you can't do this? Let's give you a grace of 50 days in the year, okay? Or 65 days, let's say, okay? 65 days to be safe, that you can't do this because you're traveling, or your kid is sick, or you don't want to do it, or something like that. 300 days in the year you still have, excluding weekends and whatever. If you do 2 shlokas a day, that's 600 shlokas in a year that you can study of Bhagavad Gita. So within a year and a half at the most, you can go through the entire Bhagavad Gita once, with only 2 shlokas a day. Now, I'm not saying memorize. That's not what I'm saying. Not to make you feel any way, but at your age, memorizing that at this point, kya fayda? Really speaking, I mean, logically speaking, really is no point. Going through Gurudev's commentary on 2 shlokas a day, understanding what is the point of this? How do I assimilate these ideas into my own life? Because if you ask any Hindu, what is the crux of Bhagavad Gita, how many of us have actually gone through Bhagavad Gita? Very few. You look at the Christians and the Muslims, they know their Bible inside out. The Muslims know their Quran inside out. Why is it that we, don't really go into it? Is it that it's too vast? Is it that we see Bhagavad Gita as only a few people should know, not many others? What is the reason? So 2 shlokas of Bhagavad Gita is one way. And CCMT has done something amazing where Chinmaya channel is on YouTube, where they have a whole playlist of bite-sized parts of Gurudev's Bhagavad Gita. There's 735 videos. Each one is anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes long on one specific part of Bhagavad Gita, from the beginning till the end. So that's also great for thinking. My only request to you is stick with one teacher's commentary and one teacher's lectures on these things. Within Chinmaya Mission, it's all one umbrella. We teach what Gurudev taught. There's nothing, you can't go wrong by going to different acharyas within the mission, okay? When there's outside sources on these things, however, there are a multitude of viewpoints. If you're reading like 5 different books on Gita, you will get confused easily. So for this vichara, because if you type in Hinduism on YouTube, you'll get a million different videos, 900,000 of which have some errors in there. So stick to one sampradaya, going through what it says, assimilating that. And Gurudev's commentary is a gem. It's amazing. Sad to see that many mission members haven't even touched it. There was a time where every mission member would go through it. 30 years on after his Mahasamadhi, we are where we are. But that's a commentary we can't miss out on. So I'd say deliberately giving that time to think about these kinds of concepts and seeing how they apply to life. Other questions? Yes?
Just a quick question along the same lines as you just mentioned. The topics that we talk here from first to end, it's just like your kids have their curriculum. Does it follow a specific curriculum that we go like chapter 1 and chapter 2, or is it just different? Like you mentioned, there are 7,000 slokas.
Yeah.
Are you picking something that's relevant to? I was just trying to understand.
Right. So the way I did it was fundamentals of Vedanta. So if you notice, first we started with what are those questions that arise just given the human condition. Where did I come from? Where am I going? Why am I here? All of these. So that got us started on Jiva, Jagat, Ishvara. We went to that triad right there in the beginning. From there, we went to qualifications on this path. Now, after knowing those fundamental principles, we're going into deeper thinking on these of what is my identity? Why can't it be this? Why is it this, like that? Now, framework-wise, the closest thing we can go to is 11th and 12th grade for Balvihar, the student studies self-unfoldment. That's a book by Pujya Gurudev, chapter by chapter, that goes into these same fundamentals. I'm taking it in a different kind of order just so we're going from a novice standpoint into an intermediate standpoint. If you notice, these are different lectures than they were in the beginning of the year. There I had the whiteboard with the basic, foundation of what this is. Now we're starting to ask questions about those things and kind of reconcile those objections and everything like that. But Self-Unfoldment is a book that starts with freedom and happiness. The very first chapter is on freedom. And how would you and I define freedom? We would say freedom is doing what I want, when I want, how I want, where I want. That is freedom. Gurudev's definition is Freedom is not doing what I want to do. Freedom is not doing what I want to do. Imagine how liberating that is. From there it starts, takes through all the different layers that are given in Vedantic thought, many of which we've touched on in these sessions right here. So self-unfoldment is one good source for that. And that's our 11th and 12th grade syllabus here. Because I thought, should I take up a traditional text? But looking at many of the new membership that we have, that could be intimidating in that it's honing in on a specific topic and it seems very esoteric. I thought this would be more of making the building blocks so that we can engage in study group sessions and things like that going forward. It's a good basis for all of that. Yeah. Any other questions? How is Bala Vihar going for your kids? What feedback are you getting this year? What are they saying to you? How does your 12th grader feel? I mean, I can't even imagine how much pressure they're under, right? These 12th graders this time. But Bala Vihar wise, how's she feeling? College acceptances, everything came out last Friday for a lot of schools. A lot of disappointed kids. They were all reaching out with, I didn't get in, my life is over. So you have to tell them, look, man, this is one, yeah, it hurts now, but this is one small blip in your entire life. It doesn't help when we say that, though. There's nothing really you can say when that sorrow is there over that. But yeah, academic pressure is definitely there. Like, for example, UT Austin, when I was in high school, top 8% was automatic admit. We had a guy in our class, he was top 8.2%, he got rejected. He started crying in class. How do you comfort someone? Like, I don't know what to say. I mean, it's awful. Now I'm seeing top 5 or 4% is the cutoff now. So it's getting much more competitive. It's not like it was before. And yeah, we perform the best we can, especially our community, but it's not easy. It's not easy. And the kids face the brunt of that. From a social standpoint, it's there. From worrying about their future, it's there, and family pressure is also there, expectations and all of that. So our kids don't have it easy, but they do the best they can. So I'm thinking, how can Bal Vihar help that as well? Or how can we alleviate that kind of a pressure? Tools that show the actual size of that problem compared to everything else they have to face, while also providing them with tools to cope with this kind of a thing. So looking at different ways to do that. So with that, let's conclude. Let's head to the big hall there. That's where they're making the Shivalingas. It'll be really cool to see. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om.